It's very hard to pinpoint the moment that I knew that I was gay. I would probably say it's more of a series of events, but I suppose the age period I would have been aware of it was in secondary school, I imagine. Definitely in secondary school, and fantasising about some of the more delectable members of my peer group, shall we say, not through the prism of being gay, because I didn't really know what that was. It wasn't something that I understood as a concept. What I thought about it was, what I fantasized about it was through the prism of being a woman being with a man, if that makes sense, because I didn't know that you could be a man and be with a man in that sense, because I was brought up not to believe in that. My biggest crush was a young man, and he was blonde and in all the sports teams and reasonably intelligent in the higher sets in classes, and and I'd go home and I'd fantasize about an ultra reality in which I was more of a female rather than a male. As I said, I don't think for me it wasn't like a moment, it wasn't like a penny dropping moment, it was more a series of different events, and I annexed it into a part of my brain that was very much about the heteronormative dimension. So in that dimension I was fantasized about being more of a woman than to allow for me to be attracted to a man, if that makes sense. And then it wasn't until I was maybe in my early teens, in which I went to college and left school, and the kind of very heteronormative structures and the very sort of business as usual Middle England mentality of schools, and went to college. And at college I was studying drama and came into contact and dance and came into contact with people who were gay, really, and sort of realised that it was a possibility for one to live a life in which one was a man and be attracted to other men. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that through the whole of my childhood I didn't know, my mum didn't allude to people being gay, but I never thought it was something that I could do, you know what I mean? Like it was always a no-no, because I grew up in quite a religious family. So as I was going back to college, when I went to college, what happened was I ended up with a big crush on some guy, and you talk about the moment of being gay, and I think, we can talk about the idea of being gay conceptually, we can talk about the feelings or thoughts of being gay, but the actual stepping into the breach and physically acknowledging that didn't happen until I was at college. And that didn't happen until I actually had a crush on somebody. And I remember we went to, they'll remain nameless, and I went to a party, and I would always go to the parties that they were at, and I knew that they were gay and they were open and they were from the West Country, and I had a big crush on them. And then we were sleeping all staying drunk in somebody's house, and I was in another room, and I went into their room in the middle of the night, and it was a really weird thing. It was like a spirit was lifting me and guiding me towards where this person was. And it sounds a little bit seedy, salacious, but it was literally it was an out of body experience in a way. It's a bit like if you ever I used to sleepwalk as a child, and it's a bit like that, like you're sort of partly awake, partly not, but you're compelled to do this thing. I was compelled to go up the stairs and approach this individual, and some stuff happened, shall we say, some initiation out of the conceptual into the corporeal, and I from that moment that was kind of like the catalyst for me sort of acknowledging and owning the fact that, of course, not only that, but because this. I'm a bit shaky on the memory, but my belief is, and this was back in 1996, my belief is that he had this information about me, which he now could share with other people, and I think I was a little worried about that. I think a little is probably a bit of an understatement. I think I was probably terrified of him telling other people, because I tried to project this image that I was straight. I know it's hard to believe now. And, but, back in Dorset in those days, being gay wasn't that much of a popular thing. So anyway, so through him and me not wanting him to disseminate the information, I came out to my peers at college, and they were fine about it, the mixed crowd and the creative arts and whatnot. And then later, subsequently, I sort of strategically worked out how to tell my family. And for me, the moment of being gay is less about. It's something that maybe it works on two levels. Like I talked about it being a sort of conceptual thing. In a sense, I always knew that I was attracted to men, but I didn't necessarily have the language to articulate what that meant. And then, as I said, as I got older, I started to become aware of what that meant through the physical interaction with this gentleman. And from there, I kind of had to sort of acknowledge what I was. But the real hurdle to the whole thing about being gay for me was really about was less about me and more about coming out, if that makes sense. The whole concept of being gay is really about being an antithesis to sort of heteronormative norm. And so for me, that was, if we're alluding to the idea that knowing that I'm gay is a big moment, a sort of seminal moment, a eureka moment, for me it was more of that moment was more when I came out to people and family. That was when I sort of had to kind of go, oh, I'm of this now. And because I'd always been brought up to be honest and about myself and all that sort of thing, it felt like it felt like it was the right thing to do, morally, spiritually, sexually, definitely. And I remember when I came out, my mum cried and she wailed like a banshee for about 10 minutes and made it all about her, as parents do. And she said, "You don't have to be a practicing homosexual." And I said, "Well, that's the point." So I was like, "No, that's why I'm doing it." You know what I mean? Like, I like men, you know. And so yeah, that was kind of the big. And you know, and it's really interesting for me because coming to this point at 45 years old, I still have quite a lot of homophobia, I think, internalised to some degree. But I still have a lot of that, and I haven't worked through it. But you know, also at the same time, being gay for me was not as much of a thing as growing up as a black man in this country, in the UK. That was more of a hurdle, that was more of an obstacle, that was more of an insurmountable psychological wall that I had to climb than being gay. Much more. So I kind of never worked through some of the issues that I presented about my sexuality. But it also that whole experience of being gay and coming to London and being black meant that I created really great friendship groups with people. Do you know what I mean? Like we were all kind of outliers in some way. You know, when I came to London, most of my friends, not just black but white, were gay, and we were kind of outliers, and we hung out together, and and I learned a lot about accepting yourself through them. So yeah. Anyway, that's a long response to a small question.